The day we buried my grandmother, a man in a county windbreaker stood by the magnolia and waited for the dirt to settle. He wasn't family, wasn't church, wasn't from our side of town. He kept his sunglasses on, even under the gray August sky of Silt County, Georgia. When the choir started, soon and very soon, he stepped close enough for me to smell his wintergreen gum and pressed something cold and metal into my palm. "Your granddaddy didn't drown," he whispered like he was confessing. "He got erased." By the time I looked down at a tarnished badge pin with the county seal and a brown business card, thick as a funeral program, the man was already gone, swallowed by the slow shuffle of mourners and the hiss of cicadas. On the back of the card, in a shaky hand, ask about parcel 17B before they pave it. Before we get into the case file, just a quick note. If stories of hidden motives, dead ends, and unexpected turns are your thing, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell so the next mystery finds you first. Now, let's open the file. When her grandfather Ezekiel Zeke Turner vanished in 1985, the official story said he slipped, hit his head, and washed downstream. No body, no case, just a tragic accident in a county where accidents happen to black folks at useful moments. 39 years later, journalism student Amara Holt returns to the red clay and kudzu of Silt County to bury her grandmother, and finds herself pulled into a tangle of hidden files, missing maps, and a land grab scheme that transferred black-owned acres to white hands under cover of courthouse stamps. As she digs into a retired deputy's secret archive and the county's polished new development plans, Amara learns that the river took less than the people did. The more she uncovers, the more the past bites back until the line between reporter and target blurs, and Parcel 17B becomes a battlefield where family, legacy, and power collide. The funeral parlor smelled like carnations and lemon oil, and grief sat heavy in the corners like an old auntie with her arms crossed. My mother, Diane, held herself together the way she always did. A thin line pressed for her mouth, hair lacquered down smooth, a corsage pinned too high to hide the tremble in her hands. She'd called me at finals week and said, simply, "Baby, come home." Now home was this. Grandma Bernice wore blue, the color she said the Lord would be wearing when he called her number. She looked smaller in the coffin, her cheekbones starker. I kept waiting for her to open one eye and say, "Stop all this fuss, Amara. Go on to the kitchen, see if they brought the correct pies." I hadn't planned to stay longer than the repast. Atlanta was an hour and a half away, a train ride back to campus, and the internship at the local paper that I'd bragged about over Thanksgiving. But the man's whisper at the graveside punctured the day like a needle. He got erased. In the church basement after, somebody had made a miracle of fried chicken. Cousins I hadn't seen in years hugged me with wet faces. Small town gossip stitched up the air. "You got taller," Aunt Eloise said for the 5th time. "These girls eat kale now," another aunt said, as if kale were a religion. Men clapped me on the shoulder and asked about journalism like it was an indulgence. "You still doing that writing? You know there's no money in that, right? Baby, you want a plate? You too skinny to be asking questions." I excused myself and slipped out the side door where the humidity hit like a wall and the magnolia's leaves flashed their undersides in a low wind. I turned the metal pin over and over in my fingers. The seal 2 wolves flanking a plow was chipped along the edge. The card had a name, B. Collier, and a number that looked like it could have sat in a Rolodex during Reagan. "Who gave you that?" Mama's voice, soft but edged, like she'd snuck up on a snake. "A man at the graveside." I held up the card. "Said Granddad didn't drown. Said he got erased. Wanted me to ask about Parcel 17B. Mama took the card and pin in one quick motion, like confiscating candy from a child. Her eyes flickered as if the words 17B meant something she'd buried deeper than her own mama. She forced a smile that didn't reach the corners of her eyes. People say wild things when the dead show up. Your granddaddy was a good man, Amara. He worked his land. He loved his family. That's what matters. What is Parcel 17B? A mess, she said. Then softer. Old business with old people who ain't here to answer you. Let it rest. The words made my back go straight, stubborn rising like heat off asphalt. I'm a reporter, Mama. You're my daughter, she snapped, and swallowed it back. And you're here to mourn your grandmother, not stir up the river. Eat some cake. Hug your aunts. We'll talk about all this later. Inside, they were cutting the caramel cake. My cousin Kaisha shimmied past with 2 plates balanced, like pancakes on a griddle. Girl, you better get you a piece, she stage whispered. Miss Lurleen's cake goes quick. But I stood there, thumb rubbing the dented edge of the pin, listening to the old river in my head. A plunk, a gurgle. A man's body heavy with secrets. Maybe, maybe not. You can't be both granddaughter and journalist without making something ugly out of somebody you love. One of my professors told me when I pitched a story about my own neighborhood. Go slow. Decide what you won't trade. At the end of the night, I tucked the card and pin into my grandmother's old Tupperware of quilting needles, the one marked with a strip of tape that said, Bernice, do not touch. If it was a mess, it could share space with the thread that had stitched our lives together. Grandma's house looked smaller than it had when I lived here one summer, between high school and the first time I told Mama I wanted to write for a living. The walls kept the same framed photos, the same brown sofa with the white doily that turned gray. I slept in her bed and woke to the noise of morning, the neighbor's rooster crowing late, a truck downshifting, a child wailing at being rushed. By 7, Mama was in her robe, staring at the kitchen window like it broadcast news. She'd always been pretty in a clean, precise way. This morning her eyes were swollen, and grief had wrinkled her, ironed her, then wrinkled her again. On the table lay 2 manila envelopes, a grocery list, and a folded pamphlet labeled Silt County Tax Auction September. Where'd you get that? I asked, pointing at the pamphlet. Came with the mail. She slid it to the side. Don't you start. What am I starting? The way you wind yourself up. She sighed. Eat. I poured coffee and ate a biscuit that tasted exactly like my childhood. The kitchen clock ticked too loud. I could feel that man's words sitting between us like a third-place setting. B. Collier, I said. Does that ring anything? Mama's mouth pinched. Ben Collier used to be a deputy, quiet man. Married to a teacher. What's her name? Retired, Lord, 10 years ago now. Why would he show up at Grandma's funeral? We invited the whole church. Everybody's always invited to grief. She pushed the tax pamphlet under the envelopes. Ben's old. He forgets things. Don't have a lot else to do. He told me Granddad was erased. She flinched almost imperceptibly. People love a story they can hold that's uglier than the truth. What's the truth? She looked at me for a long beat. Your grandfather went down to the creek to fish. He slipped. He didn't come back. Men searched. They found his hat 2 days later stuck on a branch. They didn't find him. You don't believe that. I believe what gets me through a day, she said, voice low. Some of us had to keep breathing, Amara. She rinsed her mug. The sink made that old gurgle like it was swallowing something it didn't want. If you're going to that man's house, take your cousin with you, and keep your mouth cool. Folks hear journalism student and figure you're here to embarrass them. Or worse. I'm not. You are your grandfather's granddaughter, she said, but there wasn't a lot of softness in it, which means you don't know when to quit. Ben Collier lived in a ranch house whose porch leaned toward the ditch as if it were tired of holding up anything. A wind chime made out of spoons tinkled over the sound of cicadas. Kaisha had insisted on coming in her scrubs, the kind with cartoon peaches, because she had a shift later, but also because, as she put it, I am nosy and don't pretend otherwise. You sure he ain't got no dogs? She asked, eyeing the yard. I called first, I said. His wife answered. Said he's been waiting to get things off his chest since the stroke. Well, that's promising, Kaisha said. Or ominous. Mrs. Collier answered the door with a smile that had fought through years of it and still came out kindly. She was small and wiry with sharp eyes that looked like they missed nothing. Which one of you is Bernice's granddaughter? She asked, as if there could be multiple. I'm Amara, I said. This is my cousin, Kaisha. Lord, Bernice could bake, she said, as if those were the first appropriate words to say to me. Come on, he's in his spot. His spot was a recliner facing a television that was turned off. A folded blanket laid across his knees, even though it was 85 degrees outside. He was thinner than I expected, his face carved into canyons by something harder than age. His left hand shook a little. The right held a yellowed folder like it was proof of life. Bernice, he said, seeing me. His mouth drooped on one side, but the eyes lit. You look like her when she was about to argue with a man in a tie. I'm Amara, I said. Her granddaughter. Right. He tapped the folder. She taught me no mess, once in the church kitchen when I tried to cut the cake early. Mr. Collier, she said, you brained something else. He smiled. Then it faded. She good? She passed 2 days ago. The words were fresh enough to slice me again. We had the service yesterday. Mrs. Collier touched his shoulder. Pay attention, she whispered to him. You wanted to talk to her. He nodded, eyes fogging and refocusing like the weather. Your granddaddy, he began. Zeke, good man. Knew how to read a map better than the man who drew it. That's the thing that put a target on him. That and having something white folks wanted more than they wanted to mind their own business. What did they want? I asked, keeping my voice gentle, like I was coaxing a stray. He opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of maps, handwritten notes, Polaroids rubbed smooth at the edges. One photo was of my grandfather standing in front of a field, his hand resting on a fence post, like it was the only thing holding him on earth. He wore his fishing hat and a grin that looked like mischief and trust braided together. Parcel 17B, he said, tapping the map with a shaky index finger. The county carved up the Turner Tract in '84 when they redid the zoning. They called it correction of boundary lines, he snorted, shifting paper to move dirt. Zeke didn't sign nothing. He said, why would I sell my own creek? His creek? Kaisha asked. The stretch behind the old pecan stand, Mrs. Collier said, as if they'd eaten pecans there as a picnic spot once. After he disappeared, the county commission approved a new floodplain map and said, pushed the line right over 17B, said the land was unbuildable, said wait. He squinted at me. You recording me? No, I said. Should I? He thought about it. Maybe. Maybe not. The sheriff back then, Mercer's daddy, he told me if I couldn't see the big picture, maybe I didn't need my job. I kept my job. But I kept my notes too, in case. He tapped the folder. It ain't just your granddaddy. It's 9 families from Rose Hollow to the county line. All that land got corrected or condemned or donated under duress. And who owns it now? He wheezed a laugh that turned into a cough. The folks who can say economic development with their mouth as easy as Amen. What are you asking me to do? I asked. I ain't asking, he said, voice suddenly clear. I'm giving. I kept copies because I felt like a coward for not making a scene. It's late now. My God got my soul. I got to see to my conscience. There's a storage unit out by Dunlow Road. 12. The key is in that Bible. He pointed to the shelf. In the back by Revelation. Seemed appropriate. Mrs. Collier's eyes went sharp. Ben. Edna, he said, pleading. She asked. Bernice would have asked me too. The men who did this ain't all dead. The ones that are, left sons. He looked at me. They'll smile at you like you pretty. They'll clap your mama's hand at the grocery. They'll call you Missy and Baby and tell you they knew your granddaddy. Some of them did. They knew which nights he fished. They knew he didn't swim. The room seemed to tilt. Do you know what happened that day? He stared at the blank TV like it was replaying something only he could see. I know I was told to stop asking about a brown Ford parked by the bridge. I know Zeke's boots were never found. I know men don't just disappear when they're that rooted. Not unless somebody shoves them hard enough. I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket, the itch of a recorder app I didn't open. You can use my phone, Kaisha murmured, reading the want on my face. No, I said. I'll remember. Mrs. Collier fetched a black Bible soft as old leather and cracked the back. A key slid into her palm. She held it like it might burn. We do this, we do it fast, she said to me. He sleeps at 2. They watch the storage place sometimes, the ones who don't want to lose what they took. Who is they? I asked. She looked at the ceiling like she could see through to the sky. Same day as always, baby. Just with better suits. Dunlow's storage was a row of corrugated doors facing heat and time. The office was empty, except for a cardboard cutout of a smiling white woman holding a lock. The air smelled like hot metal and old paper. Kaisha parked her aging Corolla beneath a pine that shed sap like tears. You see any watchers? She asked, peering over her big sunglasses. I see a wasp nest and a cat, I said, and one pickup down at the end. Probably all it takes, she said. Unit 12 groaned when I slid the metal up. The light flickered once, then came on. A single bulb, a single dust filter. Inside were boxes labeled by a hand that wrote small. PLATS 197986. Photos. Turner. Holloway. Tax sale notices. The sight made something inside me both thrill and ache. You don't get trolls like this often. You also don't get many opportunities to break your mother's heart. Lowered, Kaisha breathed. We found Narnia. There was a folding table and 2 lawn chairs. It felt like someone had planned for a day like this. I opened the box labeled Turner and lifted out a leather-bound ledger, a coil-bound notebook, and a sealed manila envelope with my grandmother's name on it. The envelope felt heavy as an oath. Inside, a cassette tape rattled against the paper with a little tick that made my skin pebble. On the label, in blue pen, Zeke, the 10th of June 85 meeting. Who was he meeting? Kaisha whispered. We're going to have to find a tape player, I swallowed, or a wizard. The ledger was a tax book from the county clerk's office names, parcel numbers, assessed values, notes. Some of the notes were in Collier's cuckoo egg handwriting. 17B boundary, correction, who signed. Another, floodplain map changed a FTER disappearance. Another, Calhoun Development LLC formed 386th principles. The name Calhoun hummed in my bones like a mosquito I could not swat. Every county had a Calhoun, a Hafford, a town-age-old white families with portraits in the Rotary and new money in shell companies. Silt County's was Whit Calhoun III, pictured on billboards grinning in a hard hat about the new River Point Plaza jobs for Silt County. Footsteps. Not the tick of settling heat, but rubber hitting pavement, purposeful. They stopped near the unit. Kaisha stiffened. I nodded toward the shadow under the door. It darkened. A polite knock tap against a rolling metal door so friendly it made my stomach cold. The voice was a boyish tenor. Afternoon. Y'all need any help with your unit? No, thank you, I called, bright. We're good. That right? The voice edged. Be a shame if you had a leak. We had some leaks last week. You sure you belong in 12? We paid up, Kaisha said, chin up, scrubs a defiant peach parade. You the manager? Something like that. That answered nothing. I slid the ledger into my tote and pushed the box labeled PHOS toward the back wall with my foot. The shadow stayed, long and frog-like. The polite knock came again, as if the pretense had to be finished before whatever came after. Sir, I said, we're closing up. Let me help you with that. The handle jiggled. Metal rattled up an inch before catching at the lock. Oops. I wished for a crowbar, a spine of rebar. Instead, I had a key and a cousin and a determination that made my teeth ache. I grabbed the sealed envelope. The cassette rattled again, and my tote. I nodded at Kaisha. She gripped the door with both hands, muscles in her arms popping, and when I said, now, we slid the lock, yanked up the door, and both stepped into light like we'd rehearsed it. Two men stood there, both in dark polos with the storage company's logo embroidered small. One of them was the boyish tenor, tall and freckled, eyes pale like he lived in a different sun. The other was older, heavier, with a sheriff's haircut and the kind of tan you get standing on other people's land. Ladies, the older one said, making the word friendly as a fence. Afternoon. Something we can help you with? Just leaving, I said. What brings you by? It's hot to do much lifting. He squinted at my tote like it could confess. His eyes slid to the box inside, labeled Turner. He smiled without his top teeth. Now that's a name I'm mishearing. Zeke was a good old boy. He was a black man who owned land, I said without thinking, and immediately measured my tone. We're taking some family things. Sure. He put his hand casually on the door. You kin to Ben? Why? Kaisha shot back. Oh, no reason. He's a good man, retired. Folks take advantage of good men sometimes. He did that thing southern white men do in our county when they are about to be ugly. They slowed down. You got an authorization from him to be in here? Mrs. Collier's key was a weight in my pocket. I touched it like a talisman. His wife knows we're here. Wives don't count for much in the eyes of the law, the freckled one said, and the older man gave him a look that said, not now. I felt my jaw clench. We're closing up. He lifted his hands, palms outward. No cause for trouble. We run a clean place. I just ask who's on my premises. He smiled again. Names? You first, Kaisha said. Badge? He chuckled. No badge. Not today. He looked down the row toward the single pickup idling in the heat. Y'all have a blessed day. He let his hand fall from the door. The freckled one seemed like he wanted to say more, but didn't. We pushed the door down and heard their footsteps move away. Slow, unhurried, a promise instead of a retreat. Okay, Kaisha said when we were back in the car, both breathing like we'd run. So that was fun. Fun is one word, I said. My armpits were two small swamps. We have to move this stuff. You think? Tonight, I said. Before someone else moves it for us. The courthouse in Silt County looked the same as it always had. White columns like teeth. A soldier statue in front, whose eyes looked just past you. A magnolia that had outlived 6 clerks. An air of being pleased with itself. Inside smelled like wet files and old coffee. The line at the clerk's office was 3 deep. Nobody in a hurry. A sign above the glass my grandmother used to call the window of no said property records and plat room 8:30 to 4 o'clock. A second sign said please be patient staffing shortages. A third, smaller one said smile. You're on camera. The clerk was a woman with a helmet of hair and a smile that could be used as a weapon or a welcome, depending on who you were. I knew her from years of seeing her at every parade and school play. Her name tag said B. Yates, and her eyes said, don't ask me for nothing. I don't feel like giving. What can I do for you, sweetie? She asked, already assuming my world would not be complicated. I'm looking for historical maps for Parcel 17B, I said. from 1984 to 1986, and property deeds for Turner, Ezekiel, and the River Point area. Her eyebrows ticked. That's a lot. I can be patient. Not what I asked. She leaned on the counter. Are you a surveyor? An attorney? We have to prioritize court filings. I'm neither, I said. Just a granddaughter. She softened a hair. I was sorry to hear about Miss Bernice. She used to bring us peach cobbler every June. Didn't need no paper plates. She brought Tupperware like we was kin. The softness snapped back. But I can't just give you the world, honey. If I did, I'd be here till supper. I can fill out a request form. You could. She looked behind me at the line that had grown by 2. But it'll take a while. I live an hour away. She tilted her head like she was considering my place in the universe. Parcel 17B, she repeated. She clicked her mouse as if it offended her. We got an online system now. Great. It don't have nothing older than 2001. She turned the monitor toward herself like a shield. But I can check the plat room. She said it like she was offering to lug a sack of potatoes. I'd appreciate that, she sniffed. Fill these out. She slid 2 forms under the glass like a poker dealer. Use block letters. Y'all young people write like physicians. I wrote Turner, Ezekiel, and Parcel 17B and felt the pen drag heavy. She reappeared 15 minutes later with 2 rolls of brittle paper secured by rubber bands that looked older than me. Do not sneeze on them, she said. Plat room is like a library with less forgiveness. I spread the maps on a high table and used 2 paperweights shaped like little gavels. The map from 1984 showed the Turner tract in a neat rectangle with a creek for a tail. Parcel 17B was the bottom corner, hugging the water. My grandfather's name was printed in tidy letters. The 1986 map had a different feel, as if someone with a heavier hand had drawn it. The floodplain shaded new territory in a watery blue that spilled over 17B like paint. A notation in the margin said corrected per survey. Per whose? I muttered. B. Yates hovered. You finding what you need, sugar? Why were the boundaries corrected? I asked. Whose survey? She smiled like a closed door. I just work here. You worked her then, I said. I been here since 79, she said, proud and defensive. Saw a lot. Remember little. Do you remember the day my grandfather went missing? I asked before I could swallow the sting in my voice. Her face twitched, guilt or annoyance. I couldn't tell. Flood was bad that spring. The creek took everything that wasn't nailed. Except it took him in June. She blinked. Maybe it rained in June too. Maybe it did, I said. Who filed the correction? She clicked. She clicked again. She made a noise. Says here the county commission approved it. Who requested it? She hesitated, then glanced at the line behind me and found relief. I can't hold up folks for you, baby. Fill out another form if you want copies. That's all I can do. She slid a form across, like a lifeboat she knew was already full. I wrote my name in angry, careful letters that looked like my grandfather's in the margin of his Bible. As we left, an older white man in a blue suit was walking in. He held the door with a flourish like it was a stage prop, and I was the applause. Miss Holt, he said, and my name in his mouth tasted like a test. Back in town. You look like your mother. Mr. Calhoun, I said, and my voice didn't tremble though my insides did. Congratulations on the new plaza. He glanced out the window at the billboard you could see just beyond the Magnolia. Building Prosperity River Point Plaza Calhoun Dev. It's good for the county, he said, a line he could say in his sleep. Jobs. Growth. I've always said, a rising tide. Drowns whoever can't swim, I said. He laughed, delighted that I was fun. His eyes were the washed blue of a summer sky, and told me nothing. Your grandmother made the best peach cobbler, he said. I was sorry to hear. Thank you. He tipped his head like the past was an old friend we could both wave at. You tell your mama I'm praying for her. He turned to go, then turned back. What brings you by the courthouse? Paperwork, I said. You know how it is. Oh, I do, he said, and patted the leather folio under his arm. Nobody loves paperwork more than a developer. Y'all have a blessed day. Now, why did that feel like getting inspected? Kaisha muttered when he was out of earshot. Because it was. You think he knows what we're looking for? He knows everything, I said. That's his whole hobby. On the way to the car, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost never pick up unknown unless I'm on a story. I was on a story, even if it was my own blood. Miss Holt? The voice was a woman's, precise and humid like air in a greenhouse. This is Deputy Sloan from the Silt County Sheriff's Office. We got a call that you were asking around about an old case. That illegal no? I said, lighter than I felt. No, ma'am, she said, but it's sensitive. We like to meet with family to make sure rumors don't get legs. You free to come by? I can answer your questions. She sounded black. That surprised me enough to lower my hackles half an inch. I can come by in an hour. We'll be here. Ask for me. She paused. And Miss Holt? It's true what they say. Water keeps secrets until it wants to talk. The sheriff's office had been renovated since I was a kid, but the new paint smell had been replaced by stale coffee. A poster about opioid abuse hung next to a display of deer trophies that predated me. The receptionist, a white woman with an efficiency bob and bright nails, watched us approach like we were carrying explosives. When I said, Deputy Sloan, she pressed a button with unnecessary force and said, They're here, like she was announcing a verdict. Deputy Sloan came out from a side door and was not what I'd pictured. I had expected 35, sharp, maybe a bun. She was 50-something, tall, and wore her hair in gray twists under her hat. Her badge rode her shoulder like it belonged there. Her eyes were kind without being soft. Miss Holt, she said, shaking my hand. And Miss? Kaisha. Cousin, Kaisha said, as if that made her an attorney. Come on back. She led us past a bulletin board of wanted flyers and a paper snowflake made by a child. I'm sorry about your grandmother. She taught my niece Sunday school. She taught me to slice peaches without wasting the soft part, I said, and felt my throat thicken again. Wise woman. Deputy Sloan held the door to a small interview room, whose table had carved initials from bored deputies past. She sat. So, Ezekiel Turner. Everybody talks about him like a memory that makes their teeth ache, I said. She nodded, like I'd said something that matched a note in her head. I was a rookie then, she said. Mercer's daddy was sheriff. Different time. Different rules? Kaisha asked. Same rules, Sloan said, tilting her head. Different ways of breaking them. She folded her hands. The official report says Mr. Turner likely slipped, hit his head, drowned. He was last seen by the old bridge at Rose Hollow. Who saw him? 2 men fishing, passing by. Names are in the file. Are they still alive? One lives in Waycross now. The other passed in 97. Who called the search? His wife called when he didn't come home. We found his hat. Sloane's mouth tightened. I know how that sounds. Like a fairy tale where a hat stands in for a body. But men do drown in these creeks. Not everything is a conspiracy. I don't think everything is, I said. I think this is. She took that without flinching. I also know rumors. I know some folks think the sheriff's office helped somebody help themselves, if you catch my drift. They think we turned our heads while a good man vanished. I can't prove otherwise. I can only tell you what's on paper. And what's not. What's not? I asked. Notes that went missing. A Polaroid that should be there and isn't. A survey that got corrected, but no record of the first. She sighed. I shouldn't even be saying this. But I knew your grandmother, and I like things to sit straight. Do you know Calhoun Development? Kaisha asked, as if we were in a different building, a different county. Sloane's eyes flickered. Everybody knows Calhoun. Do you know their connection to Parcel 17B? She chose her words like stepping stones. I know they bought a lot of parcels with flood risk for very little money. I know some of those parcels stopped being flood risks the moment the right people needed them not to be. I know that's not a crime if you write the rules. Who writes the rules? People who get their picture taken cutting ribbon. She looked at me. I heard you were at Dunlow Storage. Is that illegal? No. She set her elbows on the table. Be careful. That unit's been watched since Ben's first stroke. By who? By whoever thinks they see their past in it, including us. She lifted her chin toward the door. Nobody calls me when a woman is bugging the clerk, unless they want me to scare her. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to say you can't expect the truth to be waiting politely on a shelf. It will make you run. I run every morning, I said. Not like this, she said, and smiled with no humor. If you find something we don't have, you bring it to me. I'll put it in the file. Even if the file gets lost, then it won't be just yours. What do you get out of this? Kaisha asked, suspicious by nature. A better night's sleep, Sloane said. Sometimes that's worth more than this badge. That night, the house lay quiet around us like a held breath. Mama had gone to bed with her church fan on the nightstand. The fan's wooden handle stuck out of the cardboard like a tongue. Kaisha had gone home to nap before her shift. The cicadas were loud enough to make you think they had an agenda. I set the cassette on Grandma's sewing table and stared at it like I could will it to talk. The label read Zeke, the 10th of June, 85 meeting, and the little ink-slashed hyphen looked like a knife. I found Grandma's old tape player in a hall closet, buried under a crocheted afghan and the kind of phone book that could be used as a stool. The player took 4C batteries that I pilfered out of the flashlight we kept for hurricane scares that never came. The tape slid in with a click that might as well have been a hammer on a nail. I pressed play. Nothing. I tapped the side like that would rattle the past loose. Then a hiss. Then my grandfather's voice, so clear and loud, it made me sit down. 8 o'clock, he was saying. That's soft country Georgia with a stubborn county under it. I ain't gonna sign what ain't mine. Don't matter your pen is blue, and you got God on your wall. A silence. A cough, not his. You got children, another voice said, high and smooth. You want them to have something you can be proud of, don't you? I'm proud of what I worked, Granddad said. I don't need your pride. Take it down the road. We can help you if hard times come. Hard times already been, Granddad said. They came when my daddy had to ask a man to notarize a deed he couldn't read without a white head nodding behind him. They came when the county decided what's a creek is now a river. They came when... The tape clicked. The sound wavered. Bad things happen to folks who can't bend, the smooth voice said. That creek can rise quick. Another silence. Then my granddad, low. Is that a threat you gone quote in church? I'm saying what's real. I'm saying... The tape squealed. The sound distorted. A ghost in a fan. When it cleared, there was a new voice, gravelly, familiar in the way that makes your skin go cold, because you know it from somewhere you wish you didn't. Zeke, it said, let me walk you out. Footsteps. A door. Wind. The tape clicked and stopped as if it had hit the end of what it could stand to remember. I sat so still my foot went numb. I rewound fast, the old motor complaining, and played it again. When it came to the gravel voice, I leaned so close my forehead touched the plastic. I could not place it. Not Sheriff Mercer's daddy, not Calhoun. This was someone in between, a bridge between suits and guns. I heard the back door. Mama's voice, like a match that didn't want to light. What are you doing, Amara? I turned. She stood there in her nightgown, eyes shiny. "Listening," I said, my throat tight with the twist of loving who I might hurt. She walked to the table and looked at the tape player like a snake had slithered in. "Turn it off." "Mama?" "Turn it off," she said. And I did, because something in her voice was old and brittle and deserved my obedience, even if my curiosity wanted to climb out the window. She sank into Grandma's sewing chair with a sigh that sounded like it had been waiting 20 years to escape. "Your granddaddy didn't like to be told." She rubbed at a spot on the wood where Grandma's needle had nicked the varnish. "He had a way of making men mad without raising his voice. He'd tell them the truth like it was an apple off a tree, and they'd act like he threw a rock. That tape." "I know what it is," she said. "Your grandmother kept it because she thought someday it might be useful, and because throwing it away felt like throwing away his last word. But some words cut you coming and going." "Who is the other voice?" I asked. "Not the smooth one, the other." She lifted her head as if warding off a blow. "I don't know." "You do." "I don't," she said, and the lie was a stone on the table between us. I heard a car outside, the slow roll of tires on gravel. Our street didn't get much traffic this late. Headlights slid over the curtains like a warning. The car idled. Then the lights went out. Mama stood. "You need to stop." "I can't." "You need to stop before you find what you can't put back." Her words hit me like a hand on my arm. I looked at her and saw what grief had not let me see yesterday. Fear in the whites of her eyes. Not fear of ghosts or loss. Fear of men with polite knock-taps and boyish tenors and trucks that idled with their lights off. "I'm just trying to know what happened," I said. "Knowing is not always the blessing you think it is," she said. The car door outside opened, closed, footsteps on our gravel. And then, loud enough to jolt the birds out of the pecan tree, 3 knocks at our back door. Polite, like a neighbor. Mama and I looked at each other. She mouthed, "Don't." I mouthed, "I have to." I went anyway, because I am my grandfather's granddaughter. I opened the door a crack. A man's silhouette was backlit by the soft glow of our porch light, a shadow with a cap. He kept his hands where I could see them, at least. His smile came first, a courteous curve. "Sorry to bother y'all this late," he said. "I'm with the county. We've been having reports of people poking around in old case files. Thought I'd see if you needed any help." Setting that down, my mother's breath moved behind me like a thin animal. I felt my own rise to meet it. I thought of Ben's storage unit, of Deputy Sloane's careful eyes, of Mr. Calhoun's blue sky stare, of my granddaddy's voice on a tape that couldn't hold everything it needed to. "I don't need your help," I said. He nodded, the way men nod when they don't hear no. "You sure?" "That's what she said," Mama said, her voice coming like a slap from behind me. He tipped his cap. "Be seeing you, then." He didn't leave. Not leaving like staying. Just not leaving like the air he brought stayed. His truck started. He backed slowly down the street, as if reluctant to turn his tail. I closed the door. Mama's hands were shaking. Mine were steady in the way I recognize as the last calm before stupid bravery. "Tomorrow," I said. "We move the boxes, all of them." "Tomorrow," Mama said, defeated and complicit. "But you don't go alone." Kaisha and I waited until near midnight at Dunlow Storage. The heat had finally bled out of the day, leaving the air thin and tired. I wore a dark hoodie to blend into a night that wasn't all that dark. She wore a baseball cap with her scrubs because she said it made her look like she wouldn't put up with nonsense. The unit door rattled up like protest. We loaded what we could into her trunk. The Turner box, the photos, the plats, the ledger. Each lift felt like picking up a piece of my own spine. In the corner, under a stack of old newspapers, we found a shoebox taped closed and labeled audio. Inside were cassettes in their tiny coffins, some labeled neatly, some with smudges instead of names. One was marked Meeting Courthouse with a date 2 weeks after my grandfather's tape. That belongs to Deputy Sloan, Kaisha said, or to the internet. I tucked it into my bag like a heartbeat. Both. The last thing left was a rolled-up map in a tube labeled River Point, Oregon. It had a small dark stain on one end that looked like it had come from a nosebleed or a pen. I tucked it under my arm, and we slammed the door down and locked it. The key was warm from my pocket. I slid it in and turned. Behind us, a twig snapped. You can tell the difference between a twig that snaps because of a raccoon and one that snaps because of a man. This was just shy of heavy, controlled. Kaisha put her hand on my arm. I didn't turn fully. Just let my eyes move in the thin pane of the car window reflection. A shape detached itself from the shadow near Unit 10. It stood, then stepped back as if rethinking its life. "We're probably being dramatic," Kaisha whispered. "We are dramatic," I whispered back. "And also right." We got in the car without running. Running is how you invite a chase. Kaisha started the engine. The headlights lit the row of units like a game show. There was no one there. Shiny doors, a moth, a patch of weeds. Kaisha pulled out slow. We hit Dunlow Road and turned toward Grandma's. It's a road that curves gently like it doesn't want to disturb folks at night. Trees arched and whispered. Something small darted across. A possum or a dream. Kaisha cracked a joke about a possum union. I laughed because my body needed to. The night made its own noises. Then a pair of headlights slid into our rear view. No hurry. No threat. Just present. The truck because it was a truck. You can tell by the height and the way the lights sit kept. 2 car lengths behind, like we were being escorted out of an event we hadn't meant to crash. At the stop sign by the church, Kaisha signaled and turned right. The truck signaled and turned right. At the bridge, she slowed because Kaisha was born with a love of living. The truck slowed. I could see the driver's shape in the mirror. Cap, that boyish tenor in my head like a remembered song. "You sure you belong in 12? "Call Sloan," Kaisha said. I dialed with my heart pounding too loud. The phone rang, voicemail. I hung up. The truck tapped its brights once, twice, like hello. What does that mean? Kaisha asked. "It means they want us to know they still see us," I said. She breathed out slow, as if my answer somehow soothed her. Good. I was worried I'd gotten invisible. We crossed the bridge. The creek beneath us murmured its old song, the one that had remembered secrets for longer than anyone had been laying maps over it. The truck dropped back as if satisfied with its work, then turned off on a road that led toward the river and the new construction waiting like a promise. At the house, we brought the boxes inside like smuggled children. Mama helped without comment, her nightgown brushing her ankles like a wave. Once they were all stacked in the dining room under the picture of Grandma at age 20, holding a softball bat like a threat, we sat at the table and looked at each other like women who have done something and cannot undo it. "Tomorrow," I said, throat raw, "we catalog. We scan. We hide what we can't scan." "Where?" Mama asked. "The library," Kaisha said. "Miss Shonda will let us use the back room if you tell her you're doing a genealogy project. Black librarians recognize trouble when it wears a tie." "Then the newspaper," I said, and my stomach rolled because saying it out loud meant inviting wolves to dinner. "Malik's editor owes me a favor." "Malik?" Mama said, and her eyebrows rose, the way they had when I was 16, and saying a boy's name out loud was an intimacy she took too seriously. "That boy from the marching band? The one with the hair?" "He has less hair now," I said. "He's a reporter. He went to Jacksonville." "That boy was always stepping in other people's business," she said. It sounded like an insult. It was also a blessing. We sat there until the cicadas quieted in a group decision, and the clock ticked loud enough to be a conscience. Then I carried the tape player to my room and put it on the nightstand, not to play, but to watch like it was an animal that might bolt. I slept like a person who has a rope tied to both wrists, pulled by past and future in opposite directions. Morning came mean as a rooster. I left Mama and Kaisha to the history and took a walk down to the creek because I am stupid that way, and because stories sit better in me when my feet are on the ground they talk about. The path was what it's always been. Tamped dirt, the smell of damp leaves, the sticky shout of sap. The creek glinted through the trees like something winking. The old bridge at Rose Hollow was 2 planks and a rail now, more memory than architecture. Men had stood there in 1985, hands on their hips, hats back, boots muddy with concern. Would they have been this quiet? The water looked harmless, shallow enough that you could see the pebbles. It also looked like something that could turn on you if it got the chance. Water is like people in that way. I stood where I thought he might have stood. This wasn't his creek. No one owns water in the absolute, but that stretch had been his to walk, to bless, to fish. A dragonfly hovered like a tiny helicopter. The smell of rot and green and old fish wove a braid. A man's name on a map is a lie and a truth. A map says you belong, and also invites someone to argue with you about what belong means. Granddaddy, I said, out loud because saying it in my head kept it from hearing me. What happened to you? A truck engine started somewhere upriver. My spine went cold, then hot. You cannot live in this county and not be afraid of a truck you didn't invite. The sound moved toward me, slow. It had the lumbering patience of a man who knows he won't be accused of nothing that sticks. I didn't run. Sometimes standing still is the only dignity you get. The truck came into view on the other bank, tires whirring the mud, a man behind the wheel in a cap, sunglasses, a black bar. He stopped opposite me and let the engine idle like an animal breathing. He lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel in a neighborly hello. Morning, he called, boyish tenor. Morning, I called back. My voice didn't squeak. I was proud of my voice, like it had gotten a degree without me. You lost? No, I said. Are you? He laughed like we'd told a joke together. You know this is private property on this side? I'm on my side, I said, and even as I said it, I knew that I was relying on a boundary line on a paper printed by a hand that had erased my people before. You be careful, he said. Lot of folks slip out here. Rock's tricky. He revved the engine once, just to hear it. Then, like we'd concluded a business deal, he put the truck in gear and rolled along the bank, slow enough that he could still watch me in his mirror. I watched him watch me until he turned up a tire-cut road and vanished into trees that had watched us all, and would still be watching when we weren't around to care. When he was gone, the creek seemed louder. I crouched and dipped my fingers in. The water ran cold and clean over my knuckles. It didn't feel like guilt. It felt like a promise. Behind me, something clicked the sound of a camera shutter. I turned so hard I almost fell into the water. A woman in running gear stood on the path 20 feet away, phone in hand, earbuds tucked. She was white, 30-something, a face I didn't recognize. She held the phone like a shield. Can I help you? I asked. I'm just documenting, she said, a little breathless from her run or from the act of being rude. You shouldn't. There have been issues with trespassing, and the county asked us to... If we see? This is my family's land, I said, and smiled big and bright like a billboard. But thank you for your vigilance. She blinked. The app says this is open space. It is when it suits them, I said. Have a good run. She jogged off, looking back twice, like I might steal a tree while she wasn't looking. I walked home the long way, cheeks hot. This is what people mean when they say gentrification, like a weather event. It isn't just coffee shops and pricier rent. It's strangers confident enough to document you on your own dirt because a county changed a line on a map. It's we when they mean you. Back at the house, Mama and Kaisha had transformed the dining room into a war room. The table was covered in maps and tapes. A notepad labeled to scan sat next to one labeled to hide. Kaisha had a pencil behind her ear and a look that said she was born to do this. Mama's mouth was pinched, but her hands were busy because staying busy is our family's painkiller. Miss Shonda said we could use the back room starting at 2. Kaisha said, "We can scan till 5. Good, I said. We need to make copies before anyone decides to visit again. Who visited? Mama asked. A jogger with a phone and a boy with a truck, I said. Deputy Sloan called? She left a message, Mama said. Said she found something you might want to see. What? She didn't say, Mama said, and unhelpfulness had never looked so pretty. Said come now if we could. Let's go, I said. We arrived at the sheriff's office to find Sloan waiting at the door, like a guard dog welcoming the family she'd chosen. She led us to the same interview room, then laid a file down like a dealer. Inside were photos, grainy black and white Polaroids of men standing by the creek, the tilt of their hats familiar. One photo made my stomach flip, my grandfather's hat on a branch above water that looked like a mouth. What's new? I asked. This, she said, and slid over a photocopy of a survey stamped DRA, fet with a date 3 days after my grandfather disappeared. What am I looking at? I asked, though I already knew. The floodplain boundary moved. You're looking at a draft that became the basis for the correction, Sloan said. It shouldn't be in the file, because the file says the first survey was filed in August. But here it is with a June date and a handwritten note per Calhoun Rec that got blacked out on the final. Kaisha leaned over my shoulder. Per Calhoun recommendation, she said. Bottom of the page. Somebody with poor redaction skills. Lord, I love a sloppy criminal. Don't say criminal, Sloan said automatically. Say sloppy person with a penchant for convenience. Who found this? I asked. Sloan hesitated. How many hesitations had I seen in the last 2 days? A clerk with a memory. She said she remembered putting it in a box marked MISC, do not file, because she didn't know what to do with it, and her boss told her, sometimes you put things somewhere until you know what they are. Then she got married and forgot about it. Yates? I asked. Sloan said, and the noise held a whole story of woman-to-woman understanding. I'm not telling you this so you can get her in trouble. I'm telling you this because sometimes the system that works against us also trips over its own shoes, and we can grab what falls. Can I copy this? I asked. Not here, she said. But there's a library in town with a very generous librarian who would lose a page of her own book before she'd let somebody steal history from a black family. Miss Shonda, I said. She nodded. Make copies. Hide the originals. Give me one. Give the newspaper one. Give your mama one. Give your pastor one. Decentralize. She leaned in. And don't keep everything in your house. What do you think they'll do? Mama asked quietly. Smile, Sloan said. Call you by your first name in the hardware store. Pray louder. And if that doesn't work, they'll try to scare you at your back door. And if that doesn't work, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. We left with the draft survey under my shirt like a teenage secret. At the library, Miss Shonda ushered us into the back room, locked the door, and put a pitcher of sweet tea on the table like we were about to deliver, while also possibly fainting. If anybody asks, you're doing a school project about your family, she said, which is also true. Keep the blinds closed. And if a man named Hafford comes in, pretend you're deaf. Which one is Hafford? Kaisha asked. The one that looks like every other man, but thinks he owns the sunlight, she said. Go on now. The scanner hummed the song of salvation. Duplicate, preserve, repeat. We fed the maps and deeds and the draft survey through, like we were making more of ourselves. We're not taught to trust machines with our history. Too many times the copy changes. But that day, the copies felt like air in our lungs. Midway through, my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Careful what you copy. Some things are meant to be read once. A second later, another text. WC. Kaisha asked, reading over my shoulder. Who do you think? I said, and my mouth went dry. Whit Calhoun liked to sign things like he was a brand. Text him back, Kaisha said. What am I supposed to say? She grinned wickedly. Say, thank you for confirming you're watching. I didn't. Engagement is sometimes surrender. Instead, I put my phone face down and fed another document to the machine and prayed over it without using words. When we finished, we walked out into a sunshine that had not been informed of the plot. The plaza billboard shone like a benevolent father. People on the courthouse steps laughed like they had never had to sneak anything. Across the street, a boy on a bicycle carried a bag of takeout in one hand like a dare. Life, indifferent, kept happening. We took one box back to the house, and one to Keisha's, and one to Miss Shonda, who put it in a cabinet labeled Seed Library between heirloom tomatoes and okra Clemson spineless. I loved her immediately for that. As evening came in pink and hot, we sat on Grandma's porch and watched the road, Mama shelling peas like a metronome, Kaisha scrolling in short, angry bursts, me chewing the inside of my cheek like it owed me rent. Tell me a story, Mama said suddenly, not looking up. What kind? The kind that doesn't end with someone at my back door. Okay, I said. I told her about a class project where I'd found a photo of a black family in 1922 standing proudly in front of their farm, and then found a deed from 1923 that transferred it to a bank for non-payment. I told her about the granddaughter of that family, now 87, who kept the photo on her dresser like proof she hadn't dreamed her own life. I told her about the day we scanned it and printed 5 copies and sent one to the bank with a note. We remember. Mama's hands slowed. You think remembering works? I think forgetting is what they want, I said. A car rolled past slow. It didn't stop. Sloane's cruiser rolled past after, even slower. She lifted 2 fingers off the wheel. That wave again, but different in intent. You choose this? Mama asked, voice soft. Or it choose you? Both, I said. I could have been a nurse like Kaisha. You'd have killed somebody, Kaisha said cheerfully. You got no tolerance for nonsense. Patients are 95% nonsense. We laughed, the kind of laugh that keeps you from hurling your phone into the road. The sun sank orange. The nightingale. I don't know if we have nightingales. We have whatever bird sings like one started. That's when the shot came. It cracked the evening like ice in a glass. We all ducked by instinct we learned from other people's stories. A second shot, closer, toward the creek. Sloane's cruiser squealed as it turned down Rose Hollow Road, blue lights frosting the trees. From the direction of the bridge came the sound of something splashing, then the gagged cough of a motor dying. Mama's eyes were wide and white in the dimmer light. Get inside, she said. Granddaddy, I said before my brain could catch up to my mouth. It was 1985 and 2024 and all my years at once. Inside, Mama said again. Steal now. Sloane's voice came faint on her radio as we shut the door and leaned against it. Unit 3 in pursuit. Shots fired. Shots fired by the creek. Who's shooting? Kaisha whispered. Somebody who wants us to hear it, I said. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crashing dumbly against my ribs. The tape player on the table clicked in the quiet like a reminder. You ain't done yet. Outside, the night went quiet the way a room does when someone says the wrong thing. I pictured the old bridge and the water beneath, and the way a hat can stand in for a man when men decide that's all you deserve. Inside, the dining room smelled like paper and peas and fear. I picked up the draft survey and held it against my chest like armor. We did not sleep much, and when we did, the creek came into our dreams with a voice that wasn't water at all, but a man's, gravel and low, saying, "Let me walk you out."
Let me walk you out.
The creek wore the dawn like a thin shawl, mist lifting off it slow as a breath. I got there early and stood where the plank rail had a notch my grandfather used to pick at with his thumbnail while waiting for a bite. The lure Reeves gave me sat in my pocket like a warm coin. I could smell wet roots and that sweet sour of decaying leaves. The water breaks down without asking permission. Tires crunched gravel. Pastor Ray's brown Ford, not the old one, but the same shade like he'd stuck himself to the past, rolled to a stop. He got out in slacks and a polo, collarless, as if that made him a different man today. He kept his hands where I could see them. He looked tired like last night had finally told him about itself. "You came alone," he said, voice low and practiced. "I didn't say that," I said. Sloane's cruiser sat tucked behind kudzu up the road, engine off. I'd texted her and she'd written back, "Don't be foolish." Malik had made me promise to start the recorder before I said hello. It hummed inside my tote like a quiet conscience. Mama was somewhere behind the tree line, ankles lost in dew, breath steady. She'd told me, "If he says your name like a lullaby, I'm throwing a rock." Pastor Ray put his hands on the rail and looked down like the creek might have changed overnight. "It wasn't supposed to be like it was," he said. "You can believe that or not. We met in the church because men behave in rooms where God is staring. Men hide in rooms where God has to watch," I said. "Start there." He swallowed. "The commission asked me to mediate. Calhoun's father, Mercer's father, a lawyer named Hall. It was tense. I thought, God forgive me, that if we got Ezekiel to sign a temporary easement, they'd leave him alone. He could fight later, in court, with me behind him. He wouldn't sign. He said, "You don't trade air for a fan." He said, "My creek is not a sermon prop." He was right to say both. I notarized a draft to show them good faith. I shouldn't have. I stamped the devil with my name. "And after?" I asked. "After you put your initials where love should go." I walked him toward the door, he said. Reeves said he'd walk him the rest of the way. I told Reeves, "Don't raise your hand in God's house." He said he wouldn't. He looked at me finally. I didn't go down to the creek. I stayed in the hall and I prayed. That's the ugliest sentence I'll say out loud. I kept my face still enough to make a mirror jealous. "You lent your car." "I lent my keys," he said, small. To a man who said the words, "It will look better if he rides with the pastor." It did not occur to me to say no until I did, and by then the doors had closed and they were down the hall. I ran to the door. They were gone. A half-hour later, Reeves brought my keys back like nothing. Said they'd walked him out. I pretended to believe him, because what else could I do with the truth but drown? "Save him," I said. He flinched. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't dreamed 39 years of drowning without water? I am a coward and a fool and a man who wanted my congregation fed. I am all of those things at once." Gravel popped under new tires. Reeves's old pickup appeared on the bend, the same cap, the jaw dent like a punctuation mark on a hard sentence. He parked where he could see both our faces and his own reflection in the water if he wanted it. Nate wasn't with him. That calmed me a notch I didn't know I had. "You shouldn't be here," Pastor Ray said, half to himself. "Said the spider to the broom," Reeves answered. He nodded at me. "You wanted truth. You picked a good platform." "I didn't invite you," I said. "You invited everybody when you started pulling," he said. He walked up slow. He didn't touch the rail because men like him don't touch old wood, unless they're fixing it or breaking it. He looked at Pastor Ray without respect or hate. You going to make yourself the hero before you die? Or you going to let your mouth sit straight one time? I don't need your permission to confess, Pastor Ray said. Confess to what you did, not what you thought, Reeves said, then turned to me. We left the church. Zeke wouldn't ride in your saint's car. He said, I ain't nobody's prop. He walked. I walked with him because I said I would. Outside, Mercer's daddy and Calhoun's daddy sat in Calhoun's truck like two raccoons in a corn crib. Lawyer Hall was there to make it legal when it wasn't. They said they'd escort us. I said, he ain't going to run. We got to the bridge. Zeke told me to go to hell in a way that made me want to be better. Calhoun's daddy said, get him in the truck and go get the paper signed. I said, he ain't signing. Mercer's daddy put his hand on Zeke's elbow. Zeke pulled away. It went wrong in 1 second, like fights do. His foot slid where the board slick. He hit the rail with his ribs. He was still cussing when he went over. My heart beat itself against my ribs. A creek looked quiet like a gun when it's not fired. Did you jump in? I leaned, he said, and the shame crawled up his neck like a rash. I leaned, and I saw his hat, and I heard him curse God and me both. The water was higher than it looks now. He gestured. It was June, and we had rain. He caught on a branch. Then the branch broke. He went under. Mercer yelled, don't you raise a hand, Guy? Don't you bring it back on land? Calhoun's daddy said, if you go in after him, we all go down. I watched your granddaddy go down. That's what I did. And that's what I didn't do. That's the exact truth. You could have saved him, I whispered, and my hands started to shake, the kind that doesn't stop when you ask. He stared at the water like he wanted to argue with it instead of me. Maybe I'd have drowned with him, and then you'd have two men in a story and nobody to hold this part. Maybe I would have lived, and you'd still hate me because I didn't jump fast enough. He dragged his hand over his jaw until it went white. I ain't asking forgiveness. I'm giving you what you came for. The names. The order. The way it broke. Where's his body? Mama's voice came from the trees like a warning. She stepped out, hair tied, eyes bright as a blade. She looked 5 feet tall and taller than every man I know. If you watched him go down, where'd you watch him come up? Reeves never looked surprised at anything. He looked surprised now. Hello, Diane, he said softly. Don't you use my name like we shared pie, she said. Answer. I don't know, he said. Men came with boats. Not me. Men I won't name, because they ain't worth the syllables, and 2 are dead. They combed it. They found his hat and nothing else. River takes what it wants and spits where it feels like. I heard tell of bones in the bend near Dalacroix 10 years later. Nobody wanted to test them. The county didn't like to disturb the dead unless they could sell the lot. You filed a deed after he went missing, I said to the pastor. You put your notary stamp on a lie. I did, he said. I told myself he had signed earlier. I told myself my stamp was on process, not harm. That's how cowards sleep. He closed his eyes. I will resign today. I will confess in the pulpit to what I did. You will go to the sheriff's office and sign a statement first. Sloane's voice cut through us like a whistle. She stepped out of the trees with her hat in her hand, like mercy dressed as law. Your confession in church is for your God. Your confession on paper is for my file. Pastor Ray flinched. Deputy, he said, you're out of your lane. My lane is anywhere a black line got moved with a white pen, she said. Mr. Reeves, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence. We will see about manslaughter when we see if the DA wants to clock in. She glanced at me. You recording, Miss Holt? Yes, I said, and didn't apologize. Reeves put his hands out like a man who had been practicing that stance since he was young. You ain't putting cuffs on me in front of a pastor, he said. I'll cuff the pastor too if he moves wrong, she said, unbothered. She slipped the bracelets over his wrists like she was putting on jewelry for church. He didn't resist. Shame does that better than restraint sometimes. A truck engine revved on the far end of the bridge. Nate's pickup. He came fast and stupid. He stopped skewed across the road with the sureness of someone who had never been told no by a world that mattered to him. He hopped out with a bat, not a gun. The boy was learning, face flushed with inherited rage. You can't take him, he said, and even his threaten had a teenager in it. That's my daddy. That's your bat, Sloane said. You want to swing at me? We can add a felony. He looked at me. The freckled boy who'd knocked polite at the storage unit door and asked if I belonged. He looked at my mother. He looked at Pastor Ray like he had never considered that men of God could be mortal. He looked at the cuffs on his daddy's wrists, and something went loose in his face, like a knot untied wrong. Get back in the truck, son, Reeves said, gravel soft for once. You ain't helping. Nate stood there a second longer, like he might decide to be a hero in a bad story. Ben threw the bat into the bed, climbed in, and peeled off with the hiss of gravel. He would be back in some form or another. He would either grow or calcify. That would be his own fight. We took statements. Sloane Reed writes. Pastor Ray cried once, quick and angry at himself, and then sucked it back like a man who had promised not to look weak in front of the people he raised weak. By noon, Malik's piece ran. The editor had stripped a line and strengthened a paragraph and called 6 lawyers in 30 minutes. The headline sat right. A church meeting, a creek, and a disappeared farmer. How Silt County drew new lines over old lives. They ran the scanned draft survey with the bad redaction and the ledger line that said RivDev Holdings $50 rental, and the deed with the notary stamp that had the name I could not say without hating the shape of my mouth. They described the Polaroid without my mother's reflection. They quoted Sloane. They quoted Edna. He was brave late, but he was brave. And Deacon Lionel. Some of us owe more than a tithe. They didn't quote me. That felt right. The story wasn't my mouth. It was my grandfather's hand. Silt County detonated the way small places do, quietly and everywhere. In the grocery store, women paused with hands on frozen peas. In the barber shop, men read paragraphs out loud and said, Mem PH. On Facebook, Rennermum78 posted a motivational quote about forgiveness and then went private. Reverend Taylor posted a letterhead apology that was 800 words long and light as paper. 2 hours later, he recorded a video from the pulpit with his collar on and his voice steady where he said, I notarized a document that I should not have, and I put a stamp on a sin. Half the comments beneath said, We forgive you, Pastor. The other half said, Step down. He did, before Sunday. Whit Calhoun went on local radio and called it political theater and misunderstandings from a different era, and then threatened a libel suit with such teeth the host had to cut to weather. The state attorney general's office called Sloane and asked for boxes. Sloane told them where Miss Shonda's seed library kept okra and justice. The commission chair came to our porch with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and a letter of condolence that read like a flyer. He suggested a task force. I suggested a shovel. Bedihu had stepped easy around Calhoun for 20 years because he liked getting invited to river house parties, announced a grand jury. Reeves was charged with obstruction and good chance at involuntary manslaughter pending the grand jury. He pled not guilty and then did the oddest thing I've seen a man like him do. He told his lawyer to file a sworn statement anyway, with names. Men don't often go noble after 40, but shame can make old dogs learn if you rub the right nose in the right truth. Mercer's father was dead. Calhoun's father, too. The living men pretended they'd been at Rotary, and not in a basement. They had the luxury of foggy memories, where ours had always been pin-sharp. The county attorney turned red 10 times a day and sent letters like they could change the weather. The county clerk's office shrank under the light like a roach half under the stove. B. Yates held out files like a sword. We had to put our phone numbers in the freezer to stop ourselves from answering every call. People we didn't know came by with stories and pies and rumors, and one ring binder labeled scene that turned out to be recipes. And I cried laughing for a full minute until my body let go of something I'd been holding since the grave. Parcel 17B got interesting fast. Lawyers called from Atlanta with voices like smooth roads, talking about settlement possibilities and remedies and the optics of community repair. Calhoun Development announced it would convey a portion of land at current assessed value to the Turner family estate, which we rejected because land you stole doesn't return to the world wearing cash-price jewelry. We wanted a quitclaim, not a check. We wanted an apology written into the courthouse wall. We wanted the floodplain line drawn back where it had sat before men practiced God with pens. It took 5 months, a stack of filings, 2 rallies at the courthouse where Miss Shonda made signs that cut like a scripture, and a state official from Atlanta who looked like she had eaten 3 county attorneys for breakfast. But in January, the commission voted 3-2, with 1 present, to settle. Parcel 17B to be restored to the Turner estate free and clear. The floodplain map to be revisited by an independent hydrologist. A memorial marker to be placed by the bridge, not where hats go to die, but where truth is ugly and must stand anyway. The motion passed, even with Hafford glaring like he could break it by frowning. The marker went in on a cold Saturday morning. It was simple black metal with white letters that said, Ezekiel Zeke, Turner farmer, father, fisherman, disappeared near this site. June 1985. Loved, not forgotten. It didn't say erased. It didn't say stolen. But people who stood in front of it read those words anyway. Pastor Ray showed up late, stood back, then came up with his hat in his hands, like an apology. He didn't speak. He didn't sprinkle holy water. He knelt, touched the ground, and then left. People watched him go the way you watch a rain cloud pass and decide whether you've forgiven it the flood. Reeves took a plea on obstruction and got 3 years with possibility of parole. Manslaughter slid off the table when 2 dead men stayed dead, and the DA didn't have the spine to make a story without living villains. He'll get out. He'll go back to a yard without a sign. I don't know if he'll come to the bridge. Nate took a job 2 counties over and got a girl pregnant and sent me a message 6 months after the baby came that said, I don't know how to tell my son not to be me. I typed back, start with no bat, and left it like that. He wrote okay, and I believed him for that 1 minute. People asked me what got done. People who don't live here always want the neat end, the bow. This is what got done. A line moved back. A deed came home. A land returns to a name. A man wore cuffs who had never believed in them. Another man took off his collar. A county put a sign where it used to put silence. A family took back a place nobody should have had to leave. We planted a row of pecan saplings along the edge of 17B. The first spring, the settlement papers smelled less like ink and more like air. Kaisha named them after our women, Bernice, Eloise, Diane, and one for me that she named out loud to make it true. Moloch stood back with his camera for his follow-up piece and cried behind the viewfinder and pretended it was allergies, because men like him are still trying to be men around other men, even when the women in front of them have done all the work. Mama didn't come the first day. She came the second. She walked the line where the water flashes silver in afternoon and put her hand to her chest when she saw the marker and said, Hey, Daddy, like he was only late. She sat on the plank and let her feet dangle above the slough, and I sat beside her and didn't speak until she did. I wanted to tell you, she said, for years. I wanted to tell you everything. But if I said it out loud, I thought he'd be deader. Isn't that foolish? We all keep the wrong things alive, I said. You kept me alive. I leaned my head on her shoulder, and she leaned into me, and we breathed like we were learning how to do it without help. At dusk, I took the lure from my pocket. The spoon flashed, the red cloth tail frayed like home. I tied it to a new line. The creek took it and made it dance. The pass tugged once, light and teasing, then let go. Let me walk you out, the gravel voice on the tape had said. Last words to a man who could not be escorted out of his own life. I said it to the water, now without bitterness. Let me walk you out, Granddaddy. The creek kept talking. The cicadas tuned up. Across the way, children on bikes hollered like they were invincible, because you should let them believe that until the world introduces itself properly. On the far bank, Miss Shonda set a lawn chair and a book and gave us a nod that would knock a fool over. A new no trespassing sign sat on our side, cocked slightly, not because we feared neighbors, but because paper still needs reinforcement sometimes. Later that night, we ate cobbler in a kitchen that had not changed and never would, peaches from a tree that had decided to be generous. Kaisha told a story about an old man at the clinic who called her nurse girl, and she called him heart patient until he laughed. Mama told me where she hid her extra money, because she'd decided I was responsible enough to be trusted with it, and I pretended not to cry. We were loud, and we were forgiven. The article kept living longer than any of us expected. People from other counties sent me deeds and maps and begged for a Turner miracle, like you can generalize theft and retrieval. I told them, get a librarian, get a deputy who sleeps bad, get a reporter who lives on gas station coffee and anger and belief, and get yourself a grandmother who baked things no man could replicate. Then I told them, get ready to lose sleep. Truth makes you poor in certain ways. In May, the Army Corps sent a hydrologist in a hat that didn't make him look ridiculous. He said the floodplain should never have been redrawn where it was in 1985, and he moved it back on a digital map with a stylus like Moses on a tablet. We threw a picnic. We invited no one with a press release. The sky made a show of itself. Sometimes God does that without anyone asking. When it rained hard that summer, and the creek swelled like an ankle, our edge held. Paper hadn't changed the water. It had changed how men treated it. That's enough for a day. I thought a lot, in the months after, about Ben Collier's name on that woman's list. I asked Edna. She told me the truth, like she was folding a sheet we both had slept under. He took $200 once to misfile a notice, because he thought he'd be fired if he didn't, she said. He brought it to me, wrapped in a napkin, and said, say a prayer over this shame. Then he kept copies of everything he was supposed to forget. He was a coward on Tuesday and a brave man on Wednesday. He was human Monday through Sunday. He loved me good. We put his name under the marker in our own way. Ben, we said, and let his more than one thing rest with the rest. Edna laughed again eventually. That's a miracle, too. On the anniversary the next year, we gathered by the bridge at dusk. A cicada shell clung to the plank like a tiny discarded armor. Deputy Sloan wore regular clothes that somehow still looked like law. She had a new young deputy with hair like hope and a jaw that had learned to listen. Pastor Ray sat in the back, 2 pews behind the tree line, not speaking. He had a job unloading trucks at the hardware store. He was smaller. He said hello when people said hello first. He had married a humble woman years ago. She stayed. I don't know if that's grace or stubbornness. It's not my business. Whit Calhoun didn't come. He had other business, always did. He'd sold a piece of his river holdings to an out-of-state company that named itself Eternal Growth Partners, because that is the religion men like him truly believe in. The grand jury stirred and stopped. The DA lost re-election by 12 votes. Men in suits learned to speak softer. They didn't learn much else. That will be somebody else's chapter. What I learned is this. Maps don't make land true. People do. People who say, this corner belonged to my grandfather because his feet made it a path. People who say, you can redraw a line, but you cannot take my memory. People who bring casseroles and spreadsheets, who say, open that drawer. And people who slide keys out of Bibles and say, Revelation seems appropriate. I wrote another story, and another. Not all of them were about bodies. Some were about money, which is the same story without funerals. Some were about women who decided not to be quiet. I stayed mad in useful ways. I took a job in Jacksonville because the paper paid in real checks. I came home every other weekend. The pecans did what they do. They took their time and made us wait. When the first one fell, a small green bomb that split itself into what it promised, I was there. I cracked it with a rock and ate the bitter meat and pretended it was delicious, because beginnings always taste like something you could love if you keep chewing. On a Sunday in July, the water was a mirror. I went down to the bridge with a folding chair, the lure, the tape player that had started sounding like it might quit, and a new cassette I'd recorded Malik laughing on because I wanted to train myself to listen to the living. I sat until the mosquitoes announced their shift. I cast the lure. It took the light. On the opposite bank, a boy about 9 stood with his mother. He waved. I waved back and watched his mother move closer, hand on his shoulder, protective without apology. She did not take a picture of me with her phone. She did not write trespasser in a group chat. She said, evening, and I said, evening, like we had invented that word. I pulled the lure in slow, and when it reached the shadow under the plank, something tugged real and firm. I set the hook wrong, scared of hurting a fish I couldn't claim, and the line went slack. I laughed at myself and let it go. Not everything that bites needs to be kept. Not every truth requires a mount above a mantle. Some things we let swim. Some things we carry home in our hands and call by their names. The creek goes on saying what it has always said in a language older than laws. We made it learn one new word, and that was enough. When I stand on that plank now, I hear my grandfather. Not the tape, not the curse, not the splash. I hear his chuckle when my first cast backfired and the line tangled itself into a small storm. I hear him say, girl, don't throw where you can't stand. I hear him say, your hands will get wet. Tell the truth about it after. That's how we walked ourselves out. That's how we stayed. Not every story ends with justice. Some just stop, where the paperwork does. But if you listened closely, this wasn't just about what happened. It was about what we ignore. The assumptions we let slide. The voices we tune out because they don't come in the right tone. Somewhere, someone's living with the fallout of this story. Not as a headline, but as their everyday. So if this story stayed with you, don't let it fade. Shine it forward. Ask more. Doubt what's too quiet. Because what we choose to see, or not see, decides what happens next. Like, comment, share, not for clicks, but for clarity. Because awareness is how silence breaks, and how truth finds daylight.